in Colombia that you can go 4 years eating a different fruit every single day before you'd have to repeat. Our goal is to connect UK and Latin America from a tech data perspective to maximize food systems.
Mark, it's good to have you on the show.
No, a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. I think last time we met, we were both in Colombia. Now we're both in the UK. And I know the UK and Colombia is two countries that you really do a lot of work in. So what's the link between UK and Colombia for you?
I mean, I've been working in Colombia in agriculture since 2015 on different projects linking technology from satellites, from drones, sensors into different value chains. Big focus in sectors like cacao. During that period, I happened to meet a lovely Colombian lady and thought a couple of years ago, why not change my life, go and live in a part of the world that's got such fantastic potential, brilliant culture, a totally different lifestyle. And from a UK context, a part of the world that we don't really look at. And I saw a bit of a niche opportunity to work at the intersection of tech, agriculture, the food system, but between two different geographies.
Wow. So 2015, you started doing projects in Colombia, but let's kind of move back because you were talking satellites, drones, and that intersection. So where did that all start? Where did the passion for that start?
So I'm a geographer. Studied satellite imaging and analytics for a master's. Always loved looking at the world. After that, I went into consultancy and joined an environmental consultancy, and they won a lot of money from the Welsh government to look at how drones could be used for precision farming. So this is way before you were buying a DJI drone in the shops. And it hooked me into agriculture, the food system, because the thing about technology is people get fixated on the tech first. And of course, drones are very cool, you know. So I was working with everybody from a farmer all the way to supermarkets very quickly. This is back in like 2011, 2012. Got into that. I then moved to work for a UK innovation centre called a Catapult, mainly because that startup business that I was driving, we were too early. So we created a lot of buzz. We did some fantastic work, but we couldn't demonstrate the business model. And suddenly you learn, you fail. Moved to an innovation centre because I could see the potential of tech from things like satellites. Led their agri-food system work, which took me all over the world. And Latin America happened to be one of those areas that we attracted a lot of interest, secured funding to do initiatives. Those initiatives were linking the UK and the region, creating opportunities for business. And that's, where it's taken me. And I've leveraged those networks, the knowledge to build a business. And now working in 8 countries in Latin America with, I think I'm now over 30 people in different parts of the region. I think that's an exciting thing for me because you get to learn from local people in different geographies, and they bring the expertise, the knowledge that you can then complement with your skill set.
Awesome. So you mentioned you worked at an innovation centre called Catapult. So what is Catapult?
So the UK government, a number of years ago now, as part of its industrial strategy review, looked at different models around the world. There's a German model with the Fraunhofer Institutes, whereby these centres with public funding, but independent from government, could stimulate growth in different technology and areas of strength. So they invested in what's called the Catapult network. One of them's focused on satellite applications, where I used to work, but there's digital, medicine, energy systems, manufacturing. And basically they exist to help grow the UK economy, pull through science and innovation to help companies commercialise it. And they do that in the UK and also around the world. So great fun because they're government-backed, neutral, not-for-profit. So people that you want to work with, whether it's a government, whether it's a head of a top retailer in the UK, they're interested to talk with you because you get a wide view of the landscape.
Awesome. So 2015, your work with Catapult took you to Colombia.
Yeah.
So what was the first project that you worked on?
We were doing a project with the rice sector.
Okay.
They were interested because Colombia is an emerging economy. It's just come out of civil war in 2016. So we were pre-end of the civil war. Smallholders, poorer farmers. How could the rice sector, with the agronomy support that they have, use technology to optimize practices like irrigation, traditional flooding techniques of the fields? Could they use technology like radars from satellites, so sees through the cloud, look at how the scheduling of irrigation could be optimized, because basically a farmer gets access to water on a daily on a schedule. They flood the fields to use that water because they have access to it. That doesn't necessarily improve the production. So therefore, if you can help the federation provide better advisory of when they should flood that field, actually you can start to look at how to optimize from a future yield perspective, but also pest and disease management. So we did an exploratory piece funded by the UK government and demonstrated there was potential. And that was really the purpose. Is there potential? Is there an opportunity? And now the Rice Federation have taken on some of that and are developing their own approaches with other companies in the region.
Wow. So that was your first experience of Colombia. Was that also your first experience working with smallholder farmers?
Yes. I mean, I've been doing stuff more in big acre agriculture, temperate agriculture. I mean, everything from a UK upland farmer to a big sugarcane producer in Australia. So it got me hooked into the wider challenges that we have to face in a food system that many of the farmers around the world are 2, 3, 4 hectares in total. Yes, you can benefit the guy farming 150,000 hectares in Brazil, but the needs are different. Their interest in technology is similar. It's just actually making that technology work for them that's the real opportunity.
Yeah, I know the FAO, the Food Agriculture Organization of the UN, estimate that small family farms produce over 33% of the world's food, and that number could even be considerably higher than that. So your first experience working with smallholders, what were some of the unique challenges that you found working with that particular segment?
I think coming from a UK context, your perception of technology and how it can be used is completely wrong, because you're dealing with people who it's like turning up with a Tesla and actually they just want a bicycle. I mean, it's kind of that you come with these fantastic ideas, this high-end technology, and it's just not usable by them. It's the most, you know, they need the simplest pieces of information delivered to them in the easiest form, because they're often illiterate. You know, they're not they don't have access to the education that we do. Therefore, for them, actually, if you can deliver that in a simple way that they can understand that information and use it, they'll trust it. But you've got to do it at a price point where they're not going to get charged for it. Because, I mean, when we started working in cacao and you're talking to big chocolate companies, and they're going, we need technology, we need this, we need traceability for the farmers. We've got now, you know, look at today, you've got the Green Deal coming in, deforestation compliance. Everything's being pushed on the farmer. And I looked at it going, well, how do we deliver value to the farmer? I mean, it's the work that you're doing, you know, linking it into finance, access to credit, education. It's all part of demonstrating to that farmer that there's value to them, not just in the product they're producing, but on the social side of things. And I think you learn a lot from failing, and you learn a lot by going, that just didn't work. And I now understand why it didn't work. It looks fantastic on paper, but if it can't work in a real world context.
Absolutely. So when you look at kind of agri-tech and development of new products for smallholders in Latin America, is that simplicity piece, you know, the most important thing?
Simplicity, yes. Being able to translate it and talk to the farmer and demonstrate it with them is equally important. And that's where things like language come in. You know, a farmer will trust something that they have had in their hands, that they've had explained to them, that there's people they trust that are explaining it to them. And I think that's when you go there as a British person, they're super interested and excited to talk to you because you're exotic, you're not from there. I think I've learned personally that by not being able to speak the local language, you're not as empowered to explain it to them, and therefore you're reliant on others. And so simplicity, yes. Language, yes. Taking that time to build a rapport with them and trust. I mean, to me, those are fundamental, without talking to them about cost, because you know, you've got to get their interest and their buy-in that this will add value to them.
So specifically on Agritech, we're looking at delivering products and services to smallholders. In the regions you've worked in Latin America, what's the kind of smartphone penetration, internet access like? Is that as big a problem as other parts of the world, or?
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, from just a simple connectivity perspective, that is a huge blocker. Work we're doing in Colombia with Colombia, looking at how to deliver financial inclusion to audiences. The solutions, the applications are there. The biggest blocker to getting their uptake from farmers is because they're just not connected.
Okay.
And when you look at it in the same challenge space in the UK, it's like the business models to deliver that connectivity are hugely challenging. It's why one of the most exciting things for me is things like constellations like Starlink, OneWeb, these constellations of connectivity that are being put into orbit to deliver satellite-based connectivities at lower cost to audiences. But it's still too expensive for the majority. So how you deliver that model longer term is where governments, private sector have to come together to get creative. And we achieve that. We can unlock huge potential from an entrepreneurship in these rural areas.
Something like Starlink, I don't actually have a lot of knowledge on those areas. So what actually is that, and what are they trying to do?
So this is Elon Musk constellation.
Yeah.
However many thousands of satellites, these smaller satellites they're putting into low Earth orbit. So a few hundred kilometers above the Earth rather than the traditional tens of thousands of kilometers away. Mass satellite network, a constellation, to ensure that they are delivering connectivity, satellite connectivity to the entire world. So seamless coverage. Traditional satellite connectivity from bigger companies, maybe you've heard of Inmarsat, for example, much more costly in terms of bandwidth. So you're not delivering necessarily the same type of connectivity as you would do with something like a Starlink constellation. Also low cost dishes that you can, consumerized access on the ground. You put your order in, your dish arrives, you install it, away you go, plug and play connectivity. And we're seeing those now installed in so many rural areas.
Okay.
And, a community coming together to purchase one of these, to give them access. And they also, because they know they can get much more robust routine connectivity. And that's always been a challenge from a satellite perspective. You install a dish, if the dish moves, the alignment changes, you lose your connectivity. These are a different way and in some ways, it's the future way of connecting many of these areas.
And you say community comes together to purchase. So what kind of price point or range are you seeing, and what's the coverage? So is it 10 people coming together, a few households, or the whole village?
I think it varies. It can be one household. It can be, a group of people. I mean, I couldn't say it's one, it's 5, it's 10. You're at a few £100 to get connected. It becomes much more affordable from a bandwidth model. And that just didn't exist even 3 or 4 years ago. And you think the price point now is, I would still argue, too expensive for some of these communities. But with the rate of change, that price point is only going to come down.
So that's one of the trends you're seeing in Latin America right now in terms of the connectivity. What other trends are you seeing in the agtech space?
If we stick on the smallholder side, drivers like the European Union legislation to do with sustainability metrics, deforestation compliance, that's driving traceability. So needs for companies to evidence from source, things like cacao, coffee, palm, pulp, beef, etc., where they're coming from to allow obviously exports. So I'm definitely seeing, and I'm working in those spheres as well, helping companies develop an application that can get them back to their farm.
Okay.
That's the opportunity for me as a Brit working there, is to take UK companies offering these types of services and get them working locally, understanding locally the challenges, and deliver a solution that's fit for purpose. In the southern cone, if you take Latin America, you've got lots of different areas. You've got Central America, Caribbean, Andean region of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, which is basically a continent in itself. and then the southern cone countries of Chile, Paraguay, Argentina, Bolivia. If you take the bigger agriculture, a big step change in terms of things like uptake of robotics.
Wow.
Because this is the future in these types of areas. When you've got a farmer who's got 100,000 hectares, his challenge space is different. He's looking at, how do I be more effective from a labor perspective? How do I monitor at scale? This is where things like robotics come into it, where you have true autonomy on a farm. You are at the front end of agtech, and then you go and work in a country. Even Colombia's high end in sugarcane and sectors like that. But if you work in coffee, cacao, smallholder basis, they're simpler phone applications, different business models. The farmer's not spending hundreds of £1,000s on kit.
Yeah. So, like in the region, is there certain countries that have more, in terms of agriculture, more of the larger farms, and then certain countries with smallholders, or is it value chain specific? What's the outlook there?
It's a little bit of mixed. It depends also on geography.
Yeah.
I mean, the more you are going north and you become more tropical in nature, you tend to transition towards more smallholder base. The more southern you go and you move towards temperate, you tend to be obviously a little bit flatter if you're in the southern cone areas. And then you have this beautiful Andean mountain range that goes north-south. And that creates different challenge spaces in terms of production systems. Colombia as a country has pretty much everything. You've got, flat areas, intensive grazing going on, big area livestock, palm oil. You've got huge banana production going on. And you've got smallholder bases in the Andean areas of Colombia, of coffee, cacao, emerging markets like avocado. An area that's really exciting, I think, from these areas is more in the bioeconomy, looking at traditional, non-timber forest products, natural ingredients, because you've got these brilliant ecosystems, the Amazon, all these tropical rainforests. How to maximize agricultural production sustainably in those areas to reap the natural potential that exists. I mean, I think it was 10% of Colombia's GDP could come from natural ingredients, non-timber forest products, but the bioeconomy. Wow. And you think, how do we leverage that? I heard a really fascinating fact in Colombia that you can go 4 years eating a different fruit every single day before you'd have to repeat.
No way.
You think that's amazing. That's like
4 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you think, wow, if we've got the potential to help transform these countries, we can do it in so many different ways, and at the same time maximize traditional agricultural production systems to be more efficient, to be more productive.
Wow.
So you maximize the natural landscapes, the current agricultural landscapes, without having to trash the environment, which is obviously one of the biggest worries in that part of the world.
I remember you told me a stat a few weeks ago. Was it Colombia was the most biodiverse country in the world, or one of in the top three?
It's for certain areas the most. Okay. And I think you to look at it from a total context, second, I think only behind Brazil.
Okay. And because the biodiversity, the COP for biodiversity is in Colombia at the end of this year. So what are you expecting ahead of that?
What am I expecting ahead of that? Biodiversity is such a huge topic sphere in that part of the world, partly because of potential from a market perspective, but partly also because European, North American people look at Latin America. We must protect things. So you've got developing countries who are wanting to produce more. It's a threat to biodiversity. But at the same time, you've got these countries who are also sitting on substantial wealth from a biodiversity perspective, who are now thinking we can maximize the value of this. So I'm really excited to see how can that summit look at the potential that exists for new products, new ingredients that can be created, new medicines that can benefit the populations worldwide. And countries in traditional developed countries can look at it as to how can we help these countries at the same time maximize the potential there, but minimize their impact upon the environment by producing a lot of the produce that we consume. That to me is the challenge space. Colombia and Brazil at the moment have just come from the latest Global Forest Watch data, are reducing deforestation rates. It's gone down. And you think, that's brilliant. They should be applauded for that. How can we help them accelerate that? But other countries in the region are accelerating. So can we look at, more systems-based approaches to use data, use technology, use policy to benefit all?
Yeah. So you're talking about all of the different projects that you've worked on in the region. So this is part of AgriTierra, your consultancy firm. So what is the vision for your company?
I mean, AgriTierra is a consultancy. Our goal is to connect UK and Latin America from a tech data perspective to maximize food systems. UK has some brilliant capability, but doesn't necessarily traditionally look at Latin America as a market.
Yeah.
Variety of reasons. I sometimes think language is a big one. I live in Latin America. I see the potential that the UK can have if it's positioned correctly. UK is a temperate production system, but the tech and data can be transferred and used there. And there's an appetite to work with the UK. And I also see an opportunity for Latin American entrepreneurs, users, to benefit from going to the UK to share knowledge so that we actually can collectively tackle local and global food system challenges. I'll give you an example. If you're in Brazil, you're in a very tropical production system. I'm doing a project at the moment linking UK and Latin American agtech with Brazil, with Argentina. We're working with, in Brazil, Embrapa, the biggest agri-food research organization or company in Latin America. They are world leading in tropical agriculture. They're looking at the African subcontinent as a market that they can take their knowledge and expertise and their networks to work in the African continent. The UK has brilliant links across Africa from obviously historically, is pumping a lot of money in from a science and research perspective. I mean, my goal is to think, why can we not work with Brazil to leverage capability from the UK, capability from Brazil to benefit a sub-Saharan farmer in Africa? Share knowledge, create value, shared value that benefits others. Sure. And I think that to me is one of my real drivers in the things that I do, is to put tech in the right place, but to benefit communities.
Also match up people.
Yeah.
Do you think not enough is being done in that space at the moment? Do you think people are having their skills, their expertise, their knowledge, but maybe not sharing it in the most effective way?
I don't think it's a case of not sharing it. I don't think sometimes people are incentivized to do it.
Okay.
I mean, if you must see this when you're working in different parts of the world, the same initiative being done by multiple different organizations because different funders are funding the same thing. And I look at it and think, well, how can we bring together fantastic ideas and remove some of those barriers or take lessons learned? Because if we can do that, actually we're creating value, collective value. I think it's so frustrating when you go, just done a great piece of work to do with cacao traceability, and then, there's another project just doing exactly the same thing. And you're like, why are you not talking to one another?
Exactly, yeah. I've seen NGOs that have the same farmer group in the same village that have received the same training every year for 5 years from 5 different NGOs. And you just think, why is that lack of communication? But it's often that they just don't know that it's been done before.
And you must think, you said to me, is like you get now farmer fatigue.
Yeah.
They're so inundated with companies, NGOs wanting to test. It's like, okay, can somebody just show me value and let me get on with it? Otherwise, I'm just going to lose trust and faith. In Brazil, farmers are now putting signs up on their gates to say not interested in trialing agtechs.
Really?
Because there's so many wanting to test and trial things. I mean, I'm super impressed with the Latin American entrepreneurial ecosystem. They're so commercial and driven to create value quickly. But they've got to do it in ways where actually the farmer is benefiting from it, not just being hammered for free trials and tests.
Do you think that entrepreneurial ecosystem is getting the credit it deserves, let's say on an investment landscape, for Agritechs in Brazil, Colombia, other countries that you mentioned, how difficult is it for them to access the finance and the investment they need to scale?
I'd definitely say it's difficult. It's the whole global ag tech investment scene is very challenging. It's very different to how it was 5 years ago. Organizations like, for example, Yield Lab LATAM, part of the Yield Lab Global Investment Network, are changing that.
Okay.
They've done a lot of work, for example, just mapping how many ag tech startups there are across Latin America. And there's a huge amount in Brazil, quite a lot in Argentina. But if you look at some of the other countries, there's a lot less. So their access to capital is reduced. When they do get capital, their push is to go north. Look at the North American markets, look at the European markets, because they'll get more capital, they'll get better traction. So it's taking them, it's taking them, from some often very quickly from local markets to look at more traditional, mature agricultural systems. If I think about that difference in split, some of it comes down though to mindset. If I talked, last time I talked to the Yield Lab LATAM about why is it that they've invested in so many startups in the Southern Cone region compared to Andean countries, is it because it's some of the mindsets? They're not as driven commercially to scale as quickly, and therefore our return on investment is going to be less. I think for me, when I look at the Colombian entrepreneurial system, that's one thing I would love to see change more, is for them to have more confidence that they can be successful, to go to market and to be less local in the way that they think. But also you're coming up against people who've, not long just come out of a huge civil war, went on for decades. Huge changes that went on from Colombia because of some of the historical factors, but a market and an opportunity that they've got some great tech. I mean, Medellin was the capital of the fourth industrial revolution of Latin America.
Yeah. When I was there a few weeks ago, it's like a tech hub, startup capital. It was brilliant.
The downside of their success is their talent has just been hoovered up by the US.
Really?
So a friend of mine, he's a director of an IT software house. And he said, we offer a salary to a graduate of X. And within 1 year, that employee is getting 6, 7, 8 times that salary offered by a Silicon Valley company. Wow. Because they look at Medellin and go, the talent is so good, we can just cherry pick them. So you've got potential, but then just being taken from elsewhere, and that's limiting growth from a capability perspective, because you can't retain the talent.
Yeah, for sure. So Colombia specifically, you've been living there for a few years now. What's the one thing about Colombia that you prefer to the UK, that you love being there, and what's the one thing you miss about home?
Look, if I answer that off my experience of the last 3 weeks in the UK, the weather, because it's been miserable. In a serious context, I think the positivity from a cultural perspective, Colombians are very upbeat. It's a very friendly place to live. And I love that, you go everywhere. People are excited to see you, to talk to you. There's a real kind of, can do. From a what do I miss from the UK? Sometimes the fact that kind of mostly things work. That's the upside of being in a place, a developed economy is some of the things are just work and you take for granted. In Colombia, there's a bit more bureaucracy. I think what I've enjoyed most about moving is language. The fact that you can communicate now with an audience in a totally different way because of what language gives you. And that opens so many more doors, and it empowers you in a way that I don't think when you live in the UK you realise.
Yeah, I think if you're working in agriculture as well, it's, if you're maybe working in Medellin in a big company, then you might get by with English. But if you're working with a smallholder, Spanish, Portuguese, if you're in Brazil, so be able to speak the local language also gives a lot of trust to the farmer, like we mentioned a little bit earlier. Mark, it's been good to have you on the show. There's 2 questions I want to ask. First is, you've seen trends across the region. You've seen kind of what's working, what's coming up. So if tomorrow you had $1 million to invest in a venture, an initiative around ag tech for smallholder farmers, what particular area would you be looking into?
I have to say I would be looking at somewhere semi-similar to the area you're looking into. The linkage between finance and productivity and production, because so much of that region is reliant on capital, on access to loans, to finance. If you can de-risk that and do that in managing climatic risk and production risk, and develop value for farmers, I think there's a real strong opportunity to do some fantastic things there.
So that's where your money's going.
If I had $1 million, I'm not sure how far it would go, but yeah, let's go.
Cool. And the next is, part of the reason I started the Social Impact Journal was to share stories from change makers all over. So if you had a page in your own Social Impact Journal for a young innovator who is coming out of the blocks and wants to build a tech solution to support agriculture, rural communities, smallholder farmers, what kind of advice would you give to them from your career about how to approach that design process?
I think talk to people. I think if I look at some of the best entrepreneurs I've engaged in the region who've come from that background, they've been super open, wanting to engage local people and international people to get their experiences. And that's allowing them to take and cherry pick quickly great ideas and then trial them very quickly and, fail quick, fail hard and go again. And I think that to me is, with an entrepreneur in, for example, Colombia, think outside of Colombia, talk to people outside of Colombia, but also think locally, leverage those skill sets that you have, and you've got great potential.
Awesome. Mark, thanks so much for being on the show. How can someone reach out to you if they want to learn more about you or learn more about AgriTierra?
Either LinkedIn is a good place to start, or drop me an email at mark.jarman@agritierra.com.
Awesome. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of your stay in the UK. Safe travels back to Colombia, and see you soon.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks for watching the episode with Mark. I hope you had a lot of valuable insights into the ag tech space in Latin America. If you did enjoy the show, please share it with your friends and colleagues and follow us on social media on all platforms at the Social Impact Journal. See you next Monday for our next episode.